Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of 3 teenagers. I believe that your body does want to and is capable of rebuilding and healing itself, regardless of what chronic disease you may have. And I'm here for you to answer your questions, bring you innovative and cutting-edge technology and health solutions to empower you and your ability to reach your optimal state of health. Today, my guest will be talking about thyroid health. This is one of my favorite topics and how it affects your overall health. And I know that you really need that strong physical foundation and optimal thyroid to work on your mental and spiritual growth, whether it's overcoming anxiety and depression, losing weight, detoxing your body in the proper way, and even increasing your level of frequency in life. You need that strong physical foundation of health in order to gain the willpower to make the bigger changes in your life. If you're new to following me, I specialize in helping you get there. You can find my health articles, my cutting-edge natural supplements, devices, and protocols at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. I dive into an array of health conditions, their causes and symptoms, and how to address them naturally. And I have spent thousands of dollars and hours of my time biohacking different supplements, technologies, and diets that don't work, so you don't have to. If you have any health issues you need help with, you can email me directly through the website. I personally read every one. Accelerated Health Products is the sponsor of the show, so as you support my website, I'm able to bring you more cutting-edge content and guests to the show. Before we dive into thyroid health, I wanted to talk to you about my monthly free group coaching that comes with Accelerated Ascent Diet Cleanse. We start the first Monday of every month, which is next week. It is the most comprehensive cleanse I've done, and the groups that have gone through it have the most amazing results, including a reset thyroid. But they also report easy fat loss for those stubborn pounds, especially around the middle, that visceral fat, increased and sustained physical and mental energy, better bowel movements, a decreased appetite and the ability to intermittent fast, clear skin and wider eyes, better sleep, less moodiness, and they increase their cellular permeability, which is the health of the cells and the cell's ability to get the toxins out and the nutrients in, which affects your thyroid. And at the end, you successfully flush out the gallstones out of the body and into the toilet. At the end, you will have a deeper understanding of how to heal your body safely, and you take control back over your health in a world right now where we don't want to go to the hospitals. You will be able to get off some of your medications, if not all, with, of course, the guidance of your doctor. And the difference between me and any other group coaching is I provide the most cutting-edge, frequency-enhanced supplements that work synergistically with each other, and your body doesn't experience those flu-like symptoms. You truly feel great day one. If you're interested, leave a comment below, or you can check it out at the website, acceleratedhealthproducts.com. Now to the good stuff. Dr. Amie Hornaman is back, a.k.a. the Thyroid-Fixer, and she is a woman on a mission to optimize thyroid patients around the world and give them their lives back using her proprietary transformational program, the Fix Method. Dr. Amie is also the founder of the Institute for Thyroid and Hormone Optimization. She's been on the show before, so if you missed that show, definitely look at Accelerated Health Radio and TV and find it, because it is one not to miss. Welcome, Amie. How are you today?
Sara, thank you so much for having me back. This is great. I love being on your show.
And I love having you. You're just a wealth of knowledge in all things thyroid. And when I think about thyroid health, and when I think about myself, gut issues, thyroid issues, IBS, maybe, minor aches and pains. Maybe I had some dry hair. Maybe I had some constipation. It all goes back to the thyroid. And when the thyroid feels good and is optimally functioning, I feel good. It's the one thing. And even with menstrual cycles and going through perimenopause and all the hormone issues, if my thyroid is working, I'm okay. And it's just connected to everything. But today, I wanted to touch on insulin resistance. And I talk a lot about reverse aging. So my plan is to get people reversing their chronic disease and then to the fun stuff where they're actually reversing aging. And the two things that cause aging are insulin resistance and toxicity. So let's talk about how that is related to thyroid health.
Oh my goodness. So first of all, I always say, if you want to age quickly, just keep your insulin up, because we know that insulin causes inflammation. We know that Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes because of its connection to high insulin levels or insulin resistance. That insulin is actually what creates the plaque formation on the brain. Dementia, Parkinson's, cancer. We know that cancer cells are fed by sugar. Well, if you're walking around with high insulin, you have high blood glucose, that's going to feed cancer cells. So that really is the fastest way to age. And then just all of that inflammation, if we're talking about how we look as we age, yes, if you want wrinkles and dry skin and hair loss, go ahead and keep your insulin up, because that'll do it in a heartbeat. So insulin's relation to the thyroid, I always say in my thyroid patients, I see insulin resistance in approximately 99% of them. So pretty much all of them, but we can't say 100% because there's always going to be that outlier. But almost every single thyroid patient has insulin resistance. Now, why is that? Going back to what you said earlier, the thyroid is the master gland. When the thyroid is off, everything is off. So we put thyroid at the top. And if we're drawing kind of a chart, if I was drawing a chart in front of you, the thyroid would be at the top, and down from that would be insulin. So insulin becomes dysregulated when the thyroid is off, because the thyroid is controlling all hormones and insulin is a hormone. So we see this insulin resistance happening, and I'll explain in a minute what that is for your listeners who don't know. But we see this insulin resistance happening, and that just compounds all of the symptoms that are already present from a non-optimized thyroid. Insulin kind of piles onto that. So I always call it the double whammy to your metabolism, because if you have low thyroid function and insulin resistance, you are not going to lose weight. You are probably going to be gaining all the time. You're going to feel inflamed. You're going to have brain fog. So it literally causes it wreaks double havoc on your body and on your metabolism. So when we're talking about insulin resistance, just to kind of clarify that for people, if you think of your cell having a little door on it, every cell in your body, so every single cell in your body needs insulin. Insulin is secreted by our pancreas. And I want you all to think about a type 1 diabetic. If you know any type 1 diabetics out there, they have to take insulin. They have to inject themselves, or maybe they might have a little insulin pump, because they need that insulin to survive. Without it, they would die. Our bodies need insulin. We need it for survival. But I call insulin the Jekyll and Hyde hormone, because we do need it for survival. But on the other side, if there's too much of it, then it literally is the fat storage hormone. So we never want insulin in excess. We can call the fat storage hormone, the inflammatory hormone, however you want to deem it. We don't want too much of it. So you have these little cells on your doors. And when you eat, a normal functioning pancreas, not a type 1 diabetic, a normal functioning pancreas secretes insulin in response to that food that you eat, because it wants to take the glucose, the sugar from that food, and shuttle it and other nutrients into the cell. That's what's giving the cell energy. That's what's improving ATP production. So when we shuttle that glucose into the cell, cell's happy. Now, if the cell door is closed, insulin can't get in. Insulin starts knocking. Nope, can't come in. So now you have that excess insulin in the body, and we can see it in labs when we test fasting insulin. We can see it in a hemoglobin A1C level, where your blood sugar has been constantly high for every day for 3 months. We can see what's happening in your body by doing some very simple blood work. but we can also tell that, hey, your doors are closed. And then we have to work to open up those doors. And there's a lot of different things that we can do. But I'll pause there and let you talk, because that was a lot for your listeners to take in. But that's a brief description on insulin resistance and how it's tied to thyroid.
Right. And the question is, as you were talking, I'm thinking, well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the thyroid problem that led to insulin resistance, or is it insulin resistance that led to the thyroid problem? How many children, how many teenagers have low thyroid, or maybe they do, but they're undiagnosed because they don't even know to go to the doctor to get it checked?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard to say what came first, because since the thyroid not being optimized can dysregulate insulin and just kind of basically throw it all off, that's one stream. And then the other stream would be in reverse, where someone is insulin resistant. Let's say it's from polycystic ovarian syndrome in the case of young teenage girls. Let's say it is just from, I mean, maybe someone is full-blown type 2 diabetic just from the food choices they've been making all these years. And that level of inflammation and that high insulin starts to affect the thyroid, because we know that the thyroid is very sensitive to inflammation in the body. So it could be the other way, where the insulin resistance started first through choices or just body chemistry being off. And then that starts affecting the thyroid as well.
Well, and we're also in an era of 2022 where we have a major amount of toxicity in our environment and our foods, with all that's going on with the radiation, the heavy metals, all of that is clogging the thyroid, especially if we don't have sufficient iodine, which we've talked about before. And that also helps with detoxing the brain and the inflammation in the brain, which is just, it feeds into each other. What are you looking for on a lab, especially with the A1C?
So I look at all labs. All labs I'm looking at from a functional perspective. So I don't want you all to get your lab out and say, oh, well, it's normal. There's nothing flagged here. There's no high. There's no low. It's not red. We want to look at it from a functional perspective. So that A1C, 4.8 to 5.1. Anything over a 5.1 is a problem. Well, my doctor said that my A1C of a 5.6 is just fine. That we don't even pay attention to it till it gets to a 6. No, I'm sorry. If you're over a 5.1, you are insulin resistant. You are tiptoeing your way into type 2 diabetes. Insulin. And this is where it gets really interesting. And this is where the importance of all labs to get the full picture come in. So we can do a comp metabolic panel. Let me back up. We can do a comp metabolic panel, CMP. That's going to test your fasting glucose. Or if you really want to know your fasting glucose, go to Walmart, get a glucometer, prick your finger, and take a reading. 9 times out of 10 in the morning, when people go get their labs drawn, that glucose is going to be high. There's something called the cortisol awakening response, that even if you are a perfect eater and you get your labs drawn in the morning, because cortisol rises in the morning to wake us up, it pushes up our blood glucose as well. So you might get a high reading. That's why we have to test A1C and insulin as well to get the full picture. So that A1C between a 4.8 and 5.1, insulin, I want below a 6. Now, when you look at that insulin lab, that lab value range, that can go up to 20, that can go up to 25 sometimes, depending on the lab. I want it below a 6. Above a 6, again, you're insulin resistant. But the good thing is that looking at those labs, it gives us a full picture and it gives us answers, especially when I have a patient that says, listen, I'm not losing weight. I don't get it. I can't lose weight no matter what. Then we look at that insulin and A1C and we go, oh, well, that's it. Because just like we described earlier, your doors are closed. Insulin can't get in. You have access. You are literally in a fat storage mode all of the time because of that high insulin level.
And you touched on cortisol, raising your glucose. That goes back to also what stress is doing. If you're totally stressed out and you're eating a perfect diet, that's going to raise your cortisol, which is going to raise your blood sugar, and you're not going to lose weight as well. And so I want to touch on stress and its effect on the thyroid. But first, can you tell people what the A1C 4.8 to 5.1 translates as a daily number, as a daily blood glucose?
So sometimes when you get that number, that's a great question. When you get that number, oftentimes it will have an average estimated glucose number below it. And that will give what your blood sugar has been doing on a daily basis, because the A1C is literally a 3-month snapshot of what your glucose has been doing. So if it's high, it tells us, and I don't care if you're coming in saying, well, Amie, I'm eating a perfect diet. I really, really am. And I see that A1C. I go, well, either A, no, you're not. B, you're eating foods that you think are healthy, but really aren't. Or C, you're under a lot of stress, because when that A1C is high, it's indicating that you're having these big glucose spikes through the day, whether it is from high carbs, sugar, maybe you don't respond very well to that food, or stress. So you're having these big spikes through the day, and that drives it up. If your A1C is between a 4.8 and 5.1, chances are you are keeping really nice control of your blood glucose levels, really pretty much keeping it below a 120. And that's the ultimate goal. I don't even want to see you go above 120, 130 when you eat. So even a postprandial, post-meal glucose reading, I don't want to see that go very high. I want to see you eating foods that are causing a little bit of an increase, because, even protein is going to cause a little bit of a blood sugar increase. So we want a little bit of an increase, but we don't want you way, way up here and then crashing down the other side and going low. And then you get hangry and you spike again really high because you're hangry and you're going to rip someone's face off if you don't eat. And then you go high and then you go low again. You're on this vicious roller coaster. We want just a nice little wave-like pattern.
Right. And this brings up another question. In my family, we all have very different profiles of blood sugar. Someone can have a basic meal of fish and vegetables, and their blood sugar stays in the 80s, and then someone else, it jumps up. But what's interesting is my one daughter, during the premenstrual week, she has very high blood glucose, even from not eating anything. So that is true. The hormones are triggering something with their glucose. Have you seen that happen?
The only time, and does your family wear a CGM? Is that how you know?
We do we just test in the morning, but then we were also testing her after she ate, and then 30 minutes after, and then an hour after.
Okay. Because most people won't do that. So my answer really is, do I see that a lot? No, because most people are not testing that often. And I can't wait till the day where continuous glucose monitors are like $50 and everybody can grab one, because it will come. Those days will come. We're kind of trending toward that right now. And that will give us blood sugar. That will give you blood sugar readings all the time. So if you do eat chicken and broccoli, okay, you scan your CGM, you go, oh wait, that went up to 180. What was in that? Did I use a bad oil? Maybe I just don't respond well to that particular meal. So that's going to give us a lot of feedback. But to answer your question, Sarah, no, I don't see it correlated to hormone fluctuations, because nobody tests that much.
Yeah. Well, you also just touched on something else where it could be a healthy food without the carbs, but your body has an allergic reaction to it and you don't know you have an allergy to it, but that can cause a spike in blood sugar as well.
And quite frankly, that is the best way to test for food sensitivity. I don't think you and I ever touched on food sensitivity. We may or may not disagree on this, but I do not waste people's money on food sensitivity testing. In my opinion, the best way is to get a glucose monitor, a CGM, and then eat. And if your blood glucose goes sky high, if it goes above a 130, that is a food that you shouldn't be eating.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, if you have the money to do a food sensitivity test, great. But your response, absolutely. And the way your gut reacts to the food as well. And just, do you feel energized after you eat, or do you feel sluggish? Do you feel bloated? Are you constipated? And constipation, this is something where I know when my thyroid's out, because I'm constipated. And it's like, what's going on here? I've changed nothing else. Can you talk a little bit about that correlation?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And you touched earlier on a variety of different symptoms that are correlated to the thyroid. I get this question all the time about random symptoms, like I have itchiness, my feet itch, my shoulder hurts, and the answer is everything can be tied back to the thyroid because it's the master gland. But when the thyroid is low, when you are hypo, think low and slow. So motility in the gut is going to slow down. Everything backs up. So constipation is very, very common when the thyroid's not optimized, or when someone is in hypothyroid state, maybe they don't know it, or they're just still in a hypothyroid state, even on medication. You will experience constipation in addition to all the other low and slow symptoms, the brain fog, the fatigue, the weight gain, slow metabolism, slow motility. Everything is low and slow.
And it makes sense. If your body doesn't have the energy to produce because the thyroid's slow, it's not going to waste time on moving that, the bowel movements through the body.
Right.
We touched on stress and cortisol earlier, and I wanted to come back to that because reverse T3 is something that people don't understand. They hear T3 and they think, oh, well, that's a good thing, right? Because that's what I want. And I want to touch on that and how it relates to a slow metabolism, and how also it's all exacerbated by that stress level and cortisol.
Absolutely. So you and I touched on reverse T3 in the last one in terms of testing and what it means. So anyone listening can go back and listen to that. But reverse T3 essentially is your body's survival mechanism. And when you're in the ICU or the ER, and I can't even tell you, Sarah, how many times I hear this on a daily, weekly basis from patients or new patients or people I'm talking to or my followers, listeners, and they'll say, well, I asked my doctor and they said that they only test that in the clinical setting, meaning in the hospital. And I go, that's great because it's going to be high in the hospital. But what if it's high when you're walking around trying to live life? When you're laying in a hospital bed due to an injury, a trauma, an infection, at that point of time, your body is going to kick up that reverse T3 to slow down everything else, because our bodies are smart and it knows that in the hospital or during an injury or trauma, you don't have to lose weight. You don't have to feel good. You don't have to think. You don't have to have energy. You don't have to grow your hair. You just have to survive. So that's what reverse T3 is doing. It's our survival mechanism kicking in, saying all other functions need to slow down. Gut, you don't even need to work. She doesn't need to poop. She needs to live. Hair, you don't need to grow. This person just needs to live. So if you have a high reverse T3, and this is where I completely disagree with doctors that don't test, except outside of the clinical setting, quote unquote. What if a person is trying to live life, raise kids, run a business, do a show, sell supplements, go to a job, cook a dinner, clean the house, and your reverse T3 is high? You're not going to be able to do any of that, or you're not going to want to. So we have to test reverse T3. Now, things that raise reverse T3, we know stress. High cortisol will increase that reverse T3, as will insulin resistance, like we were talking about earlier. That will increase reverse T3, hands down. So despite the medication that you're on, if you are under a high stress situation, if you have chronically high cortisol levels, if you have toxicity, if you have high insulin, if you're low in certain nutrients, if you're anemic, there are all these things that can increase T3. It'll push up that survival mechanism and you're not going to feel good, all because you have reverse T3. Now we want to find out the why and what's causing it and address that. But first we have to start with the fact that you have the high reverse T3 and go, oh, whoa, there's a problem here. There's an answer to why you feel like garbage, but there's a problem here that we need to dive into.
Can you go deeper into why insulin resistance causes the high reverse T3?
It's the inflammatory mechanism. It's because insulin is so inflammatory that high insulin in the body is literally turning on the body's survival mechanism signal, because our bodies are so smart. We have to give our bodies credit, right? When we don't sleep, our metabolism goes down, cortisol goes up. Our body knows how to respond to certain situations, but our body gets really tired of responding to the same darn situation all the time because we keep messing up and making bad choices. So that high insulin is creating such an inflammatory response in the body. The body has no choice but to say, wait a minute, there's too much going on here. There's too much inflammation going on. We need to shut down everything. Just shut it down. Just like when you're in the hospital, shut it down. You don't need to feel good. You don't need to grow your hair. You don't need to burn fat right now. Just stop. We need to take the inflammation down. Now, when reverse T3 goes up, the body doesn't know the source. It's not like our body goes, well, okay, we're raising reverse T3 because the insulin's high. Why don't we work at pushing down her insulin a little bit? No, the person has to do that. I had a patient last week, young girl, and this is the classic, the absolute perfect example of reverse T3 and high insulin not even being related to the thyroid medication that she's on. We can talk about T4 pushing to reverse T3 in a second, but this girl was on T3 only. She came to me on T3 only. Obese, low progesterone, high testosterone, so PCOS was present. Her insulin was actually flagged high. So now we're out of the functional realm. Mm-hmm. Now we're into it's actually flagged on the test. So that means it's a real problem. Like when you're flagged, that's a real problem. So hers was, I want to say her insulin was a 25, 29. Reverse T3, I like it below a 12. The cutoff is 24. Hers was flagged high at a 32. So you could see it in black and white that high insulin was literally driving up her reverse T3, driving it up. So the only way, we could throw all the T3 medication at her that we want to, but the only way that reverse T3 is coming down is by her changing her diet and addressing the insulin, period. That is it, because that was the direct cause in black and white of her high reverse T3.
So as you're talking about the inflammation, the body's reacting to the inflammation. Right now, I've got a lot of people in the last year, because of everything that's been going on and that extra level of toxicity.
Yes.
They're saying, this doesn't make sense. I'm walking my 8 miles a day. I'm not eating anything bad. I can't lose this weight. They've put on the extra weight. Yes, there are the people that have been drinking a little more and eating a little more because of all that's going on and the stress. But then there are people that have been sticking to their program and the weight is sticking and it's not going anywhere. And the methods that used to work aren't working because of the extra level of toxicity and inflammation. And then I'm assuming the higher the reverse T3 as a response, and they don't know that this is going on.
Correct. Yeah. And we're even seeing it in people that have never had a thyroid problem before. So we always think of reverse T3 as correlated to the thyroid, because it is. It's one of the thyroid tests that we do. But I have a chiropractor friend. I interviewed her on my podcast, Dr. Lisa O. And her antibodies, when we she had been gaining some weight. She's like, this isn't me. What's going on? And we tested her thyroid antibodies were 3,800. Her reverse T3 was high. Her free T3 was low. And she didn't even know that she had a thyroid problem. And it was all from her being around a level of toxicity. I'll say she was touching her patients, and many of them are toxic, and they're literally like releasing that toxicity. So just from that alone, that was the only change that occurred from last year to this year in her life. And that level of toxicity that she was exposed to on a daily basis, kind of actually going through her skin, raised her antibodies and raised her T3. So you are absolutely correct. The level of toxins that we're exposed to now, as even opposed to a few years ago, is vastly different. And we're seeing it in the labs, and we're seeing it in symptoms, and we're seeing it in crazy symptoms people having. So yeah, you're 100% right. Our bodies are literally in kind of a survival mode right now.
I think they are. Even my kids, and they'll come to me and say, well, why do I feel this way? Why am I bloated? Why is my face all puffy? Why am I exhausted? And I'll give them the answers, but they don't want to hear it because they think in their minds that they're already eating super clean. They're already taking supplements. it's not normal to live like this, where you need all of this supplementary, the supplements and the extremely clean diet to function. But unfortunately you do, because we are just being bombarded with this toxic load that our bodies don't know how to deal with.
Yes.
We're going to take a short commercial break, and we will be right back talking with Dr. Amie Hornaman. Welcome back to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sara Banta, and the owner of Accelerated Health Products. And today we have Dr. Amie Hornaman. Amie, here we are. I'm doing everything right. All of a sudden, I'm gaining weight. It doesn't make sense. So what I do is I take more T4 medication, right?
Right.
That's the solution. I've got a bottle here. And tell me what goes wrong when someone does that.
And, usually it could start with the person themselves, but it also goes back to their practitioner. And what doctors have learned about treating thyroid conditions is that, okay, if a person needs more thyroid medication, you give them more T4, and then we give them more T4, and we give them more T4. And the problem with that is that as we increase the T4 dose of medication, that actually decreases a person's free T3 level. So even endocrinologists know this. The higher the T4 med goes, the lower the circulating T3 will be in the body. And what that does is it increases reverse T3. So the more T4 has two choices. It can convert to reverse T3, or it can convert to free T3. Now we hope it converts to free T3, but 9 times out of 10, people have struggles with that conversion. I always say it's like running a marathon and jumping over hurdles at the same time, because high insulin, high cortisol, low iron, estrogen dominance, toxins, underlying infections, low magnesium, low iodine. You need moderate selenium, not too high, not too low. All of those factor in to conversion. Well, think how many people have perfect levels of everything? 0. So when we give someone more T4, it's 9 times out of 10 going to convert over to reverse T3, and it's going to put the brakes on, and they're going to go into survival mode. So even though you would think, well, more is better. No, not in the case of thyroid medication. More T4 is not better. It can actually make a person worse, because it reduces the level of free T3, that circulating free T3. Now, when we think about free T3 being the active thyroid hormone, and every cell, every organ in your body needs it, then the organ itself can become hypothyroid. And what I mean by that is your heart needs T3 to beat. And remember, we're talking so much about our bodies being so intelligent today. Mm-hmm. Our bodies are so intelligent that it knows that, to keep this person alive, we're going to take whatever T3 is here, because every cell needs it and every organ needs it. And we're going to give some to the brain, and we're going to give some to the heart just to keep it going. It might be really low heartbeat, but it's still beating. And then that's it. So the heart is actually hypothyroid. That's why many hypothyroid patients have very low heart rates. It's not because you're athletic and Lance Armstrong. It's because you're hypo. And your heart can't beat that fast because it doesn't have enough T3. And that's why thyroid patients have brain fog and they can't think. And they think they have early Alzheimer's because there's not enough T3 getting to the brain. So if we give a person more T4 and cross our fingers and wish on a rainbow that converts over, we're doing a disservice to that particular person, because they probably will get worse and they'll experience more and more hypo symptoms. We have to really
Sorry about that. I am blaming that on the new moon and Mercury's in retrograde. So here we go.
struggle is real. It really is.
Right. Yeah. I was worried about a dog barking, my new puppy, but instead we got 2 commercials. Maybe people needed to see it twice. Okay.
Exactly.
So you were saying.
So that's why we have to really get that proper treatment protocol down for an individual. Even if you are on T4 only, instead of going up in the dose, let's get to that root cause of why you're still experiencing the hypo symptoms that you are, whether it is weight gain or brain fog or constipation. Let's figure that out. Now, we might use a little bit of T3. We can use glandular products. We can use things that help convert T4 to T3, but going up in the T4 dose and medication, not going to work. And I guarantee you, so many of your listeners, because every time I say this, I get this response. Oh my gosh, my doctor just raised me from 112 to 125 or 125 to 200, 175 to 200. And they're always talking about their doctor bringing their dose up, and not feeling any better.
Okay, so 2 questions, because I don't want to forget, is number 1, is it easier for the body to convert T4 to reverse T3 versus free T3? And that's why it does so. Why is the body have the propensity? There's the puppy. Why does the body have the propensity to convert the T4 to reverse T3 versus just free T3?
So it's a great question. It's not that it's easier to convert to reverse T3. It's just that we have so many factors working against us in the conversion. Because of the life just the world that we're living in, because of the food that we eat, because of the toxins, because of the high insulin, because many women and men are now estrogen dominant because of all the estrogens in our society and in our world and in our life. So just due to all of those factors, that's what's really driving up the reverse T3. It's not that it's easier for the body necessarily. It's just because we have all of these boxes that have to be checked for perfection in order for that smooth transition to happen. And there actually are 2 genes as well. There's a DIO1 and a DIO2 genetic SNP. And we don't really test for them that much over here. They're very readily tested in genetic profiles over in England and in the UK. But here, I don't see them on like a 23andMe, or even if someone sticks it in, genetic genie or whatever, I don't see that spit out the DIO1, DIO2 very often. But those are 2 markers that indicate that a person is a non-converter or does not convert very well, depending on how that comes back.
Okay. Well, I know during my group cleanse with the Ascent Diet Cleanse, we go through a liver flush, and a lot of times the thyroid just turns on because you're cleaning out the liver, and the conversion from T4 to T3 occurs in the liver. Is that correct? Or a lot of it does?
That's one of the glands, definitely. So the main conversion gland is the thyroid, and then we know some T4 to T3 converts at the tissue level, and then in the liver and the gut. So you're right, Sarah. I mean, if the liver is clogged, if the gut is a mess, that's going to impair T4 to T3 conversion as well. If there's not enough iodine, then T4 to T3 conversion isn't going to happen. If someone had radioactive iodine, a total thyroidectomy or partial thyroidectomy, now we just removed the main conversion gland. So it really cracks me up and actually kind of pisses me off when I have someone come to me that had their thyroid removed or destroyed and their doctor puts them on T4. I go, wait a minute. You don't have the gland that once produced T4 and T3.
Right.
You don't have the gland that 90% converts T4 to T3, and we're giving you T4 only. How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense at all. It makes zero sense. So for those people, we really kind of have to hone in on their treatment plan because they're actually lacking that active thyroid hormone being produced naturally.
So the other question is when my clients do go through my cleanse and they feel so much better, the weight is falling off, they feel the energy physically and mentally, their thyroid is working, they're afraid to get off their T4 medication. Is this something that they need to wean off of slowly, or is it something they can stop cold turkey if they feel that like things are really working on their own?
So every person is different and every situation is different. So it really depends on why they're on that thyroid medication to begin with. And is it because they have Hashimoto's and they're in the later stages and their thyroid gland just simply is like an itty bitty pea size now and it's not producing enough T4 and T3 anymore? Then I would say that person has to stay on it. But like you said, continue doing the liver cleanse, continue doing that kind of support and support the gut. And you're right. We don't give enough love to the liver. We got to give some love to the liver because it does so much for us and we don't pay enough attention to it and supporting it. So yes, doing a cleanse once every quarter, fixing your gut, checking your adrenals, making sure that your estrogen is all your hormones are balanced, but estrogen specifically, because we don't want you in an estrogen dominant state. And how does estrogen relate to progesterone? And then let's not forget that all the hormones are processed and metabolized in the liver too. So that comes back to the liver support. So if you're doing all of the things, then maybe if you are in the later stages of Hashimoto's, you just stay on a little bit of thyroid medication. If you're in the beginning stages and we're catching it early, or you just have that primary hypothyroidism where it's not that the thyroid gland is being destroyed by autoantibodies, it just stopped working very well for whatever reason. Maybe you were taking a medication that shut it down. Maybe you were over exercising and over dieting in your 20s and that shut it down. In that case, we might be able to get a person off their thyroid medication. I agree, slowly weaning off. Let's just do it slowly, taking that dose down slowly so we don't just rip out the thyroid medication and the thyroid hormone that the person once had while doing all the things for support at the same time.
So we have a few more minutes left, and I wanted to touch on number one, estrogen dominance, and how, our body's ability, part of their survival mechanism, is to take these toxins, which are xenoestrogens, and shove them into fat cells, protecting our bloodstream. And that's part of survival, right? And so that is going to increase insulin because we need the insulin to store fat and coat and protect those toxins into our tissues away from our blood. So that's one thing that is going to contribute to a slow metabolism and the high stress and all of these factors that are going to just domino effect into a low thyroid. But adrenal fatigue, and we talk about stress, and I don't know anybody who doesn't have a high level of stress right now. Right. And then they're also feeling that adrenal fatigue, which leads to inflamed kidneys, water backup, water retention, edema. So can you talk about adrenal fatigue in the last 2 minutes that we have?
So the term adrenal fatigue is way overused, but our adrenals do get hit. So true adrenal fatigue is when your adrenals have just crap the bed. They're bottomed out. You're low. You're basically in a place where you might need hydrocortisone to bring it back to life. But adrenal we'll call it owie, like adrenal hurt is with all this stress. So you might do a 4-point salivary cortisol panel and you might see that your cortisol is really, really high at 5 p.m. Well, that's when you're coming home from work and you're like, oh, I gotta, cook dinner and help the kids with homework. And maybe you're going home to a fight or whatever, cortisol spikes at 5 p.m. or cortisol spikes right before bed because you're all stressed out. You're not sleeping well and you're thinking about everything you have to do tomorrow and you're still watching TV and you're not wearing your blue light blocking glasses and you're eating sugar for a nighttime snack. Then we see another cortisol spike. So those spikes aren't necessarily that your adrenals have just crapped the bed and aren't working anymore, but you are doing things or things are happening in your life to produce those spikes at those particular points of time. And that's why we do a 4-point salivary cortisol, because we can see the actual pattern through the day. Testing it once in the morning is pointless. You have to test it through the whole day to look at that pattern. But those little cortisol spikes, even though it's not true like adrenal exhaustion, adrenal fatigue, adrenal blowout, those little points will wreak havoc with your body and cause a lot of inflammation.
Well, I just love this topic because as we talked about, there's so many things that go back to the thyroid, and it really is the master endocrine gland. And when your thyroid's intact and feeling good and functioning optimally, you feel like $1,000,000. And so I am so happy that you were on today again. And why don't you tell people where they can find you and are you seeing patients one-on-one now?
I am taking on new patients one-on-one, and I have a group program. So you can find me at dramiehornaman.com. And on there, you can click book a discovery call. That's a free call where you can talk to a member of my team about what's going on with you. They're all schooled, they're all educated, and you and I will eventually jump on a call as well. And we can go over what is right for you, because right now we can prescribe in over half of the states in the US. So if someone is stuck on T4, we can definitely change up your medication, use bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And it really is just the full package, a transformational journey of taking you from broken to fixed. And then people can also find me on my podcast that you were on, Sarah, the Thyroid-Fixer podcast. And that's on all podcast platforms. And of course, all social media. But I won't go through all the handles. You can find me on social.
Yeah. And Dr. Amie covers all the details, all of your questions. She goes through them all. I mean, anytime I listen to her, I'm thinking, I know many clients that have asked that question and are looking for those answers. So thanks again for joining us today, Amie. And thank you, everyone else. If I can help you with your health issues, you can directly contact me through the website, acceleratedhealthproducts.com. And I'm happy to put together a protocol for you. I know it's sometimes hard to know where to start. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, and my YouTube channel, and over 100 different podcast channels under Accelerated Health Radio and TV, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora, or whatever podcast platform you subscribe to. Join us every week at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays Pacific time, and you can use coupon W4HC20 for 20% off site-wide. If you're interested in the Accelerated Ascent Diet Cleanse, we start next Monday, and I'd love to have you. You can email me directly to see if it is right for you. Thanks for joining us again on Accelerated Health Radio and TV, and have a great week. Thanks, Amie.